Welcome back to the Hive, and thank you so much for joining us. Today we have a really great show with a really great writer. He was the one, the only, Dennis Arthur Sigalos, better known as Siggy. Dennis was born August 16th, 1959. That was the same year that Ronnie Moore won his second world championship in Europe. Young Dennis had a great childhood. His father was a boat racer, and he was a pretty good one at that. There on the water, Dennis's dad met another boat racer, and they became good friends, and he had a son. And I'm not sure if any one of you know who that son was, but I don't know if his name's familiar, but the son's name is Bruce the Fox Penhall. Bruce was a couple years older than Dennis, and their families hung out. They got together and they played games and they just hung out, and they brought Bruce over to Dennis's house, and Dennis and Bruce were forced to become good friends, and they became good friends. Maybe this is Dennis's downfall, I don't know, but if you're hanging around with Bruce Penhall as a kid, that must be something else. And Dennis and Bruce probably got in a lot of trouble, and they became good friends. Dennis was on my live stream show a while back, and he told me this story that when the Penhalls came over to hang out, he would tell his dad, hey, move all the cars and stuff out of the garage because Bruce and I are coming over. And they would get their bicycles and they would ride down this hill into the garage, and they would power slide on this slick concrete surface that his dad had there for working on his boats and stuff. And they had a good time. They started racing speedway in Dennis's garage. And then when the Sigaloses came over to the Penhalls in Balboa Beach, California at the beach, Dennis and Bruce went riding their bikes all over the beach. And they were power sliding, and they were running little old ladies over. And both fathers sponsored one of the hottest speedway riders of the early 70s. He was one of the great riders of all time. His name was Rick the Rocket Woods. I think that's what got the boys going. They would go to Costa Mesa Speedway and watch Rick Woods, the Bass Brothers, and all the rest of those characters. And it left a big impression on the boys. And they said to themselves, we want to be speedway riders one day. The boys were so excited about riding speedway, they asked their dad to build them a track. And Dennis Sigalos' dad built a track in the back of his Orange County Food Services building in Anaheim, California. They built a real Costa Mesa sized track. He paid people to build that track. They had George Wynn, the old Englishman, rest in peace, the guy who built that bike for Ivan Major, the gold plated, that's George Wynn. And he did the starting gates, did the crash wall. They had a real speedway track, and the boys had a good time. Back in the day, you could not just go to the store and buy a junior speedway bike. So the dad had Ed Schaefer, the mechanic of the Rocket Rick Woods, build a junior speedway bike for the boys. It was just an amazing little bike. It was built with a McCulloch chainsaw motor. Can you imagine having a speedway bike with a McCulloch chainsaw? Have you heard that noise? It's crazy. And they went ahead and they sounded like hell driving around that track. They would ride that speedway bike all the time, both speedway bikes, at the practice track, after schools, during the weekends. They just kept working, having fun, and they were becoming good speedway riders. They both just kept getting better and better and better. But Bruce was a couple of years older than Dennis, and that made a big difference. I asked Dennis when he's on the show, did you race Bruce Penhall a lot? Because I could picture that. And he said, no, we just practiced, we rubbed handlebars, we went around the track together. That's all we did, we just had fun. Knowing Bruce Penhall and Dennis Sigalos, I bet they did a lot of racing. As a young 13-year-old racer, Dennis Sigalos was racing the racetrack at the Orange County International Raceway, OCIR, and he went ahead and won some of those competitions, and he got introduced to the Trophy Girl. Dennis was very good at age 13, and he won some big races, and he had to be introduced to the Trophy Girl, but he was only little, and the Trophy Girl was like 18 or 19. So he had to climb up a ladder and then kiss the Trophy Girl. Now I understand why Dennis was such a good rider. He knew that if he won those main events, he could kiss the Trophy Girl. So he wanted to be a good rider and kiss that Trophy Girl. He was a smart guy. I like Dennis Sigalos. One day, when I was a young 13-year-old boy, I was a delivery boy, a paper boy for the Orange County Register. When I got home from my route, I opened the sports page. I liked the sports page. I read it every day. And then I saw this article about this young speedway rider, my age, 13. His name was Dennis Sigalos, and he was winning main events at the OCIR. And I just got mad. I was like, hey, this is not fair. And this is the article that I cut out when we were 13 years old. There's Dennis, a young Dennis, winning main events at 13. That's not fair. You see, Dennis was kissing trophy girls, and I was delivering newspapers for the Orange County Register. That's BS. Dennis's partner in crime, Bruce Penhall, was a couple years older than him, and he started Speedway earlier at the Irwindale Speedway. Bruce Penhall was an amazing rider when he started Speedway. He was good, and he became one of the best riders in just like a short period of time. And young Dennis had to wait. He was younger than Bruce Penhall, so his dad bought him a 500cc Speedway bike. He got to practice on that practice track a lot before he turned 16. In Speedway, there's a rule that says the riders must wait till they're 16 years old. I want to ask this question, who made that dumb rule up? I mean, the riders should be able to ride when they're ready, not wait till a certain age. And Dennis was ready at age like 13 or 14. But 16, Dennis was waiting a long time to race. Dennis had no choice, but he had to wait till his 16th birthday in August. And then he was able to race Speedway professionally. It so happened that Dennis and we turned 16 about the same time. And I had bought my bike just around that same time when I was 16. I only had 2 or 3 rides on that Speedway bike. I hardly even knew how to ride that thing. And Dennis was riding a Speedway bike for many, many years. First night of my Speedway racing days at 16, I opened this program and I was like, oh, there's Rick Woods and Wild Bill Cody. And I open this program in the pits, and I look at heat 11, and I'm like, OMG, I got Dennis Sigalos in my race. Once I knew that Siggy was on the program, I looked around the pits, and I'm like, we gotta find this guy. And there he was. There was Siggy. He had a beautiful white pair of brand new Bates leathers with orange all over them. He looked gorgeous. Then I looked down on my uniform and I had an old used pair of leathers from Ron Taylor. He was about half my size. The arms went about the right here. I could barely fit in the uniform. It was bad. And then in the front of my leathers, I had the name Brian duct taped with duct tape. I didn't even have proper leathers. I just couldn't stop staring at Siggy. I was just looking at him and I got really mad. I was upset. And I just said to myself, I'm gonna beat that guy. I'm gonna beat his butt. I was just furious. That was the first time that the blood rushed to my head, and it was with Siggy. And the problem was, I was only racing Speedway for a couple times, and Siggy was a D1 rider. That's a big problem. I was on the 0-yard line, and Siggy was on the 10-yard line, and I was like, okay, I got a head start on that guy. And then the tapes went up, and I went into the first turn in the lead, and I said, I'm beating Siggy. Woo! But suddenly, Siggy blew by me on the inside. Woo! And I was like, oh my gosh, and Siggy just beat my butt. And he won that D3 main event, this first D3 main event. And Siggy lit that fire underneath me, and I was really mad. And I was like, he's better than me, but I'm really pissed at that guy. I was really furious at that Dennis Sigalos. But somehow I got over it. The following year, Dennis raced in the team racing, in the 76 team racing. He raced for the San Bernardino Sizzlers. Do you know the San Bernardino Sizzlers? They had free all-you-can-eat Sizzler steakhouse after every race. A couple years later, Siggy went over to England and raced with Ivan the Great Major on the whole Vikings. He was good, he was learning from the master, and then he became an Ipswich witch. Can you imagine Dennis Sigalos, an Ipswich witch? But he was a witch. And then he raced 1 year for the Wolverhampton Wolves. So Dennis Sigalos had a great career in the British League. Dennis had a storybook career in the British League. He won the Peter Craven Cup, the Golden Helmet, and the British Open. In '82, Dennis had a great year. He won the Best Pairs Championship with Boogaloo. Bobby Schwartz. They did great, and then the same year, Dennis was in his first World Championship at the Los Angeles Coliseum in LA, California, and he placed third place in that event on the podium with his buddy Bruce the Fox Penhall. Dennis Sigalos. Siggy! He was a great friend, great rider, good husband, dad, son. Siggy's just a good guy, and we want to thank you, Dennis, for all your hard work, your dedication to the sport of Speedway. You had a great career, you did a great job, even though you beat me. But if Siggy could actually see that old lady that he ran over on the beach, he would look at her and say, "See, lady, I became a champion."